Well, good afternoon. I tried to speak in English, but my English is very bad. I'm sorry, but I talk the aid of the traduction. Some information regarding the grape Barbera, because Barbera in Piedmont represent a very high percentage of the surface of viticulture. Viticulture in Piedmont is around 43,000 hectares, and 10,000 hectares are cultivated with Barbera, with the different denominations, obviously. Barbera d'Asti, Barbera d'Alba, Piemonte Barbera, Barbera Monferrato, and so on. But obviously, the diffusion of Barbera is very important in all the region of Piedmont, but also is one of the grapes that are present also in other parts of the world. The difference, for example, with Nebbiolo is exclusively present near to the Alps Mount, and Barbera have a diffusion also in other parts of the world, like Argentina or Australia or New Zealand. But the Barbera is born in Monferrato Hills, and the character of this Barbera are the character due to the genetically influenced character are very stable in the time, and the differences between the grape of the young vineyards and the old vineyards is not qualitatively, but of concentration, because the character of polyphenols and acidity are stable in the time and also in the different parts of the world. But the character of volatile compounds and phenolic compounds are expressed in different concentration, but is due to the genetic of these particular grapes. So we can observe, for example, the character of the grapes, the vine characteristic. The bunch is very dense, the color is dark blue, high vigor and yields. It's very complicated to cultivate Barbera because we can obtain a very different result from the point of view of the character of the wine. If you produce 80 tons for hectare or 10 tons for hectares. Is very different than the character of the wine, because we have in particular the character of concentration of polyphenols and the equilibrium between malic acid and tartaric acid. Tartaric acid is very stable, and malic acid can change with the level of yield and obviously with the climate influence. In the past 40 years, we have observed a very important change in the character of the grapes and the wine Barbera for different reasons. The first is the capability of the producer to understand what is the character of these grapes and to limit the level of production and increase the concentration of the grapes, of the component of the grapes. The second reason is the increase of the quality of the plant, because in the year the researchers have selected clones of Barbera that have little weight of the bunch, but also little weight of the berry. And these have produced an increase of the concentration of anthocyanin, for example, and a reduction of acidity. The third reason is the climate change, because we have observed very different temperature during the season of vegetation, and we have obtained a level of maturity very high, too high in the recent year, because we have observed normally for Barbera of the past century in a paper published by Mario Castino in 1983. He described Barbera like a wine with 12 degrees of alcohol, total acidity of 8 grams per liters, and only the 30% of the sample in the market have completed malolactic fermentation. Actually, the recent year we have wine that naturally reach 40 degrees of alcohol, 40 or 50. We have normally around 5 or 6 grams per liter of total acidity, pH 3.4, 3.5, and the 100% of the wine have completed malolactic fermentation. This is due to the change of the technology of winemaking, but also the change of the character of the grapes due to the 3 factors that I have described. So the acidity in particular is the character that have influenced the evolution of the wines, because the reason the malolactic fermentation in the old wine was very difficult, because normally the wine born with a pH around 3. The level that allow a natural malolactic fermentation is 3.2. If you have a pH under 3.2, it's very difficult to start malolactic fermentation. Normally, this phenomena was due to the temperature of the springtime of the next year, when the acidity was lowered due to the precipitation of tartaric acid. And this produced a problem for the palatability and drinkability of the Barbera wine young in the past year. So this is very important change. But from the point of view of the style of this wine, actually we have observed that today we have a very complex wine, and we have observed, for example, an increase of the concentration of the anthocyanin in the berry. This is very important character, because the polyphenolic profile of Barbera is very particular. We have normally a level of total phenols that we can consider around 3,000 milligrams per kilogram of grapes. But a difference from other types of grape, we have only a little part of this due to the tannins, normally 1,000, 1,050, and a very high level of anthocyanin. Frequently, also in the past year, the year 23, we have reached very easy 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams of anthocyanin per kilogram of grapes. That's a level very high that characterizes the wine that we consider top of the classification of the red wines. And is a wine, is a grapes that allow the production of a wine with a high level of color, low level of tannicity. And this produce an evolution of the wine very different from other type of wine in Italy, for example, Nebbiolo or Sangiovese, and so on, where the ratio between the colored part of the phenols and the tannins part of the phenols is in a ratio of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. In the Barbera, this ratio is 1 to 3. It's very different condition. And this allows also to understand why Barbera can be utilized for very different use, because if you drink a young Barbera, you can appreciate the very good color, but also a very particular smell due to the presence of certain character that in the old wine are not present, and that are due to the presence of certain volatile phenols, in particular phenolic acids like cinnamic acid, that are very important in Barbera, reach a concentration 10 times in comparison with other type of grapes. This allows the perception of the ester of this phenolic acid, particularly ester of alcohol, ethyl with phenolic acid, ethyl cinnamate, for example, that have a smell very intense of caramella.
Yes, sweets, not caramel. It's
not caramella.
Yes.
Cinnamon.
Yes, sweet baking spices, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, things like that. Burnt brown sugar, toffee.
The smell that I remember is cherry gum, a big bubble.
So this is where we're talking about, so caramella in Italian is like a boiled sweet. So we're looking at two different sides of a sweetness coin here. So he's talking about a boiled cherry sweet, as well as some of these sweeter baking spices.
This is very evident in the young wine Barbera. It's not evident in the old wine because the ethyl cinnamate is hydrolyzed in 6 months. But obviously the wine that are utilized, for example, for aging in wood, produce an evolution very different. But Barbera in wood have the possibility to modify the stability of the color, because the wood is the better microsigillation that we can obtain naturally. And this allows the possibility of the combination of the tannins of the grapes with the anthocyanin of the grapes. It's not possible imagine other type of stabilization, because the reactivity of the colored part are possible only with the tannin of the grapes. And we obtain tannins in Barbera from 2 different origins. The 80% is due, 76% is due to the tannins of the skin, and 25% derived from the seeds. These of the seeds are very reactive and allow easy combination with the anthocyanin. This is very important, and this change also the method of winemaking, because if you have a project for old wine, you can obtain maceration of a number of days that allow the solubilization of the tannin of the seeds. If you have idea to produce a young wine for easy drink, you can limit the number of days of maceration. We obtain a wine with bigger color because the solubility of the anthocyanin are very easy also in aqueous solution with the first day of maceration. And when the alcoholicity increase, we obtain the solubility of the tannin from the seeds after 5-6 days of maceration, and this produce the preparation of aging model of wine. And this is one of the evidence that derive from the very good knowledge of the composition of the grape, because the progress in the evolution of this wine is due in particular to the very good knowledge of the composition of the grapes, not of the wine. Mm-hmm. The future for the wine in the world is to applicate a model of winemaking that translate the character of the grapes in action of winemaking. The action of winemaking are very similar in the world. So crushing, desteming, maceration, but the difference is the time, is the moment when I go with the oxygen or with the reduction or the movement of the pomace is made in one method or another is very important because, for example, in a study that we have made some time ago, we have observed in certain center of winemaking grape in starting of the winemaking with very high concentration of anthocyanin, and the wine that after the first months with a level very low of color. Why it is? Because the winemaking method produces the extraction of the color in a moment when the wine is not in condition to protect this color and not extracted tannins. And this anthocyanin during the pumping over or drying off produce oxidation, and we have a shunt of the color that is reduced of the 90%. This is very, very difficult to make a very good vinification. So the method of winemaking is changed. It changes because in the first phase of the evolution of Barbera, the problem was to produce a rationalization of the alcoholic fermentation and malolactic fermentation. Actually, in the phase 2 of the evolution of Barbera, the problem is technical decision due to the very good knowledge of the character of the grapes. This has produced an increase of the quality because we have a lot of possibility to maintain the color and to produce an evolution of this color with a color very stable in the time. This is the differences. So when we change the tank for winemaking, so horizontal tank or vertical tank, pumping over or should on
Punch
yes,
down.
is not so important. The importance is to have a perfect knowledge of the composition of the grapes, and after is very easy to produce the wine if you have very good in your mind what is the destination of the different components. We can make the Barbera also in very simple tanks, but it's important what is my knowledge of the grapes, not what is the technology that I can utilize. This is very important. Yes, this is not so important. Yes. Yes, it's very important to consider this difference. What I have underlined that the differences between the tannins of the skin and these of the seeds. This is very important because actually when I go in the vineyard to verify the level of maturity of the grapes, not only we verify the concentration of sugar with the refractometer or the dosimeter is important, but it's very important to verify in the berry what is the color of the seeds. The color of the seeds is very important because if the seeds are green, is normally not perfectly reach a level of maturation, and we obtain normally a tannicity characterized by green character and little astringencies. But when the seeds are black or marrone? Brown, is very good because normally we have a very low possibility of dissolution of tannins only in the end of the fermentation, and we can observe the better results regarding the equilibrium of the taste. Another characteristic very important regarding the color of Barbera is to consider that the 5 different anthocyanins that represent the color of all the vitis vinifera, Cabernet, Dolcetto, Merlot, are all represented by 5 different anthocyanins. Of these 5, only one is very stable to the oxidation, and this is named Malvidina. And in Barbera, Malvidina represents the 45% of the total anthocyanin. So we have a color very stable, very stable. In other type of grapes, like Nebbiolo, we have Malvidin represented the level of 20% or less. Yeah. And it's very easy to obtain orange color if you have not an attention to the oxidation. So Barbera, from this point of view, is robusto.
Yeah, robust.
Okay. The color very robust because it's very difficult to oxidate Malvidina. This is very important for the color of Barbera. Other information.
Could I interrupt you at this point and say that your study of the contrast between Barbera and Nebbiolo of 2001, 2004, something
Yes.
like that. So you will find that in my book. You will find the graph of his study of these 2 great varieties. Is your book.
David got very excited.
So thank you very much.
In this slide, you can observe the level of total anthochanin average, because we have some Barbera that reach and arrive other that 1,000 milligram, but in a panorama of the Italian grapes, Barbera is normally in the part IG of the graphics and indicate a facility of obtaining wine very colored. But it's not only important what is the positions regarding the amount of anthochanin, but it's very important to remember that the type of anthochanin are very particular, and the high stability of Malvidin allow to obtain wine very colored, also with grapes that not reach very high level of concentration of total anthochanin.
Esatto.
Yes, we have observed this in the past.
What page is this?
The tannins, we can observe, for example, in this slide, what is the level of tannicity. Extractable oligomeric tannins is a part of the tannins that have particular reactivity. In laboratory, we have an idea measuring the reactivity with vanillin that represent the tannins that have a reaction with the saliva. It's very interesting because it's an idea of the astringencies in months. And Barbera you can observe is very low from this point of view because is in a scale of grapes that have a lot of these compounds is very low. The extremity of the other part is Sagrantino, that represents the maximum of astringensis. Okay?
See?
But also very important grapes that normally will not utilize for this reason, like Pinot Noir. Okay? And the other part, obviously, of the very important Italian and international grapes. This is very particular character because it is one of the reasons why the activity of Barbera in wood is produce very good result because there is not a contrast between the tannicity of the grape and and the reactivity of the woods. On the other hand, the oligomer tannins like Oenology tannins that are produced by the wood work like a trasportatore di ossigeno. Help me.
Yes, they transport oxygen from point A to point B.
Scavengers, okay?
Yes.
That produce very high reactivity, a catalyzation of the reactivity between anthocyanin and tannins. But remember, the tannins of the wood not produce color, not produce combination with the anthocyanin, only produce a catalyzation because they transport radical of oxygen and produce increase of the reactivity of the tannins. This is very important because Barbera is the maximum of the reactivity in the wood. On the other hand, there is also some problems because when the wine is very young, remember, have a high level of phenolic acids. This phenolic acid is very good for the smell, but also the pabulum for the Brettanomyces that can produce with Barbera a problem of smell, the off flavor due to the phenolic compounds named bread character. This is very important to remember because in certain moment of the history of Barbera was indicate the wood of the barrels like origin of the problem of Brettanomyces smells. But this is not correct because the wood have not bread character directly in the wood. Barbera have a predisposition to this problem, and it's necessary to remember that the wine that go to the barrels have necessity of a good level of stability from the microbiological point of view. No sugar in barrels. This is the big problem. We have a very big problem because actually in the recent year when the alcoholic degree is very high, frequently we can have little residual of sugar, like 2 grams, 3 grams of sugar not fermented. This is a vulnus very important because in the barrels we have normally low level of sulfur dioxide, temperature good, pH increased due to the change of climate, and this can produce a predisposition of Barbera at the production of flavor due to the Brettanomyces, in particular in the old vineyards, because the old vineyards are normally more concentrated in sugar, more concentrated in phenolic acid, and this produce wine very interesting, very rich, but also with this little problem of instability from the microbiological point of view. Okay?
Wow.
So,
Okay. Aroma compounds in Barbera is good to remember. We go to the conclusion of my expositions. It's good to remember that the Barbera contain a lot of precursor of aroma. Is not a terpenic grapes, obviously, but certain type of terpene are present. The level more important that represent 40% of the volatile compounds are no-isoprenoids. No-isoprenoid produce with the time the formation of character like ionol, beta-ionol, that are typical of the old Barbera, typical aroma of the old Barbera, and the time necessary to produce the evolution of these compounds is around 1 year, 2 years of aging to understand very good this character. Obviously, in the old vineyards, the level of concentration of these precursors is very high because these precursors are normally due to the exposition to the sun, and in the old vineyards normally we have a surface of exposition very important of the grapes, the bunch, and this produces an increase of these compounds. The other, like alcohol and benzenoids, are very similar in the young and old vineyard, but the character that produces the increase of aroma of the old wine is very particular due to the characteristic of no-isoprenoids. Are very similar to other type of grape, obviously. Also in Nebbiolo there is a certain precursor of this type. But the concentration in Barbera is very high. So, this is the, remember regarding this ethyl cinnamate that is the character of the young Barbera, that remember fruity character. This is, remember, regarding the risk of ethyl phenol formation, and I can conclude my little exposition, and sorry for my bad English.
Oh, it's good. It's very good. Very good.
Thank you. Obviously, question regarding Barbera, I am at disposition.
Have you come across interest from other regions of Italy in Barbera, more outside of Piedmont?
The origin of Barbera is very complicated to understand because we have a historical document around 1,200 with indication of cultivation of Barbera. My colleague ampelographs have studied with technical biomolecular study the origin of Barbera, and probably the mother and father are probably not exist, are eliminated.
Lost, yes.
Yes, but are probably due in Monferrato.
Okay.
Barbera and Monferrato probably are born with viticulture. Sorry, go.
Are you aware of any other regions, not Piemonte, but planting Barbera in Italy with any sort of with any seriousness or success? Yeah.
Non sono sicuro di aver compreso bene il significato.
Sì, altre zone in Italia.
Sì.
Altre zone in Italia. Sì.
Ma Barbera, allora, in in mandatory disciplinary of origin, not. There is not other wine in Italy that indicate only Barbera or also Barbera in the base. But the cultivation is present in Puglia, for example, and in other regions. But the total diffusion in Italy, I think, is around 18,000 hectares, and in Piedmont 10,000.
Ethyl cinnamon, you say it gives a fruity character to Barbera. What kind of fruity?
What kind of fruity? Exotic fruit.
Exotic fruit. Okay.
Okay.
Black fruit?
Not apple or cherry. Exotic fruit. Yes.
And what, do you find that in other grapes? With like that fading in
Yes, but not in this concentration.
what other grapes?
The concentration in Barbera is 5 times more concentrated than in Dolcetto, for example, or in Nebbiolo.
But is it?
It's due to the concentration of phenolic acid, and phenolic acid are present in the center of the berry, not in the skin, in the liquid part. And it's possible to obtain this aroma also if you made winemaking without maceration, only utilizing the must. We obtain, yes, because in the pot.
Is it you only find it in northern Italia?
Not because if you to understand very well this aroma, you can taste. This is the season. The wine of carbonic maceration.
Yes.
Are the same aroma.
Game.
Why? We can make carbonic maceration with all the grapes, Merlot, Freisa, Barbera, Nebbiolo. Normally, we obtain the aroma of ethyl cinnamate also in other grapes with carbonic maceration because we crush not the berry, and we obtain a little amount of alcoholic fermentation, enzymatic fermentation in the berry, and we have no oxygen. So when we crush the grapes, the ethyl cinnamate is already formed.
But it's not anonymous, maybe.
Not. Carbonic maceration.
So this morning we were talking about the rising levels of alcohol in Barbera. It's very, as you know, it can put on 1% of alcohol counted in 1 week at the end of the season. And we were wondering, what can the grower do to keep the alcohol, to have phenolic ripeness without too much sugar? What can they do?
This is a challenge for the future because we can obtain in the future a modification of the growing method of cultivation of the vineyard to avoid the increase of sugar because Barbera is not a wine for the low level of alcohol. To taste Barbera with a good equilibrium is necessary to reach 30 or 40 degrees of alcohol. But 40 is good, 15 is not so good, okay? Probably is necessary to increase the surface of photosynthesis and to modify the type of green pruning to increase the accumulation of phenols and not in sugar. But this is a problem of physiology, is an interdisciplinary problem to discuss with the viticulturist and with the researchers of physiology of the plant. Okay, but is the future. Is the future because not only this, but also the use of water, because it's necessary probably to have an aid from a little amount of water to not produce stress, because a part of this accumulation is due to the stress due to the excess of temperature.
The older vines can cope with that stress better. So you've got some older vines. Older vines can cope with this water stress and things like that better than younger ones.
Yes, yes.
And
the problem of project for the future, because also the theme of porta innesto, porte greffe en français,
Sì.
okay, is a problem because actually the diffusion is of cover 5 BB, very good, very strong, but the capability to reach very low profundity is not so evident. Probably will be in the future 110 Richter and so on that are producing the low vegetation but more capability to reach the water in profundity.
It's a rootstock problem. It's a rootstock problem.
Sì, sì.
Well,
Bene,
Fantastic.
grazie. Oh, sei bravissimo, ma dai.
Bene. Gianni, Marco. Almeno Gianni.
Sì, sì.
adesso guarda.
Di terra normale.
Se parlo di vino me la cavo, se devo fare una conversazione è già diverso.
Sì. Ah sì, la sabbia, perché questo sarebbe troppo peccato, no? Se mi assorbere. No. Ok, deve stare.
Ero ieri con Attilio,
Stare a suo
è
posto.
venuto un altro
Questi
Langa.
due insieme sono quanti grammi?
Con 56 grammi va bene 50.
Allora sono
150.
150.
Gianni Fabrizio.
Ok.
Ok, allora.
Eleganza.
Coraggio Gianni, adesso spetta a te la parte
La parte più sociale.
più sociale.
Allora, io purtroppo parlerò ancora italiano.
Tanto abbiamo lei che va
Meglio un buon inglese, meglio un buon italiano che un pessimo inglese.
Cercherò di parlare almeno un po' italiano.
Dai, Gianni.
Allora, no, la Barbera in questo territorio è fondamentale. Avete visto i numeri della Barbera. In Piemonte sono 10.000 ettari su 18.000 ettari in Italia, ma quello che non abbiamo visto prima o sulla quale non abbiamo fatto attenzione è come è calata la coltivazione della Barbera. Sono adesso 10.000 ettari, in passato eravamo intorno a 16.000 ettari.
So the point that he's making is that we were talking about numbers. So in all of Italy, there are 18,000 hectares of Barbera. In Piemonte, 10,000 hectares. But the number we didn't look at is there used to be 16,000 hectares of Barbera in Piemonte, and it was too many. So they've cut that back so that we've got a lower yield and better quality rather than higher yield and more quantity.
Comunque alla base di tutto, per capire tutte le conseguenze dal punto di vista sociale anche sulla Barbera della viticoltura italiana, bisogna partire da un presupposto. L'Italia, contrariamente alla Francia, ha prodotto vino non per vendere. Non c'era un motivo commerciale nella produzione di vini in Italia se non per vendere ai vicini, per scambiare.
So what we're looking at now is this presupposition that in Italy, the tradition, until very recently, when we look at how many thousands of years wine has been made, is that Italy didn't produce wine initially for commerce. It was for local production, to be shared with neighbors and friends, to be used as a barter system, not to be something that was a commercial export to make money outside of the country. Other countries like France were doing that long before we were.
I primi vini commerciali italiani li conoscete meglio di me perché sono di vostra creazione. Marsala.
So the first commercial wine from Italy was Marsala, created by John Woodhouse. But as he was traveling from England in the Mediterranean, discovered Marsala, sweet wine that was taken back to England, created the first external commercial market for Italian wine.
Questo cosa significa? Significa che abbiamo una base produttiva prettamente contadina in Italia e soprattutto in Piemonte.
So the real basis for winemaking, vine growing and winemaking in Italy was through farmers. Especially in Piemonte, it was farming, it was agriculture. It wasn't making a luxury product for sale. It was farming. It was a food item.
Per questi contadini il vino che producevano era un alimento. In un momento storico dove l'alimentazione non era sufficiente, il lavoro era lavoro duro, non meccanizzato, servivano tante calorie e il vino apportava tutte le calorie che servivano.
So traditionally and historically in Italy, work was hard. Italy was a poor country, and the laborers in the fields, on farms, they needed huge amounts of calories to see them through days of, long days of sort of 16, 18 hours of manual labor. And wine provided a huge percentage of the calories. And of course, when we're talking about this in the past, wine didn't have the alcohol level it has now, but it had the calorie level and also other vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, were included in there. It was part of the diet. It was a food item, not an alcohol, not a pleasure or a luxury item.
Parliamo anche ovviamente di, essendo il vino un prodotto contadino, non commerciale per molto tempo, commerciale lo è diventato dopo gli anni 60, infatti la viticoltura anche piemontese è cambiata molto, ma in precedenza, essendo la viticoltura contadina, era molto frazionata. Le aziende avevano pochi ettari, quello che lavoravano.
So until the 1960s, this sort of system persisted. Wine was really made for local use, local barter, local consumption. It wasn't until the 60s when Italian wine started to become a commercial item that was sold externally outside of the local region and outside of the country. And the problem was that up until that time, all farmers had a few rows of vines. So tiny, tiny fractions of pieces of land where every one of you who was a farmer had a few rows of vines, and you made enough wine for your family or whoever you were trading with to get other things. So it was very fractured, the system. There wasn't, a wine growers association.
Molto spesso erano aziende non viticole. Oggi vediamo tutte le vigne. Una volta erano aziende agricole con il bestiame, con gli ortaggi, con la frutta.
So it was very biodiverse. All of these small farmers had animals, livestock they were raising, they had vegetables and fruit, they had grain. Wine was not their, grapes for wine were not their primary products. They had several other things that they were devoting time, effort, and money and labor to grow, as well as grapes.
Ora mi direte, ci hai raccontato tutto questo, ma quali sono le conseguenze di tutto ciò nei vini che assaggiamo oggi?
So what are the consequences now? So what the wines that we're going to taste today, that we've tasted earlier and that we'll taste now, this is the consequences, what happened after the 60s.
La prima di tutta è che il contadino ha scelto i vitigni più semplici da coltivare.
Yeah, obviously. So the farmer chose the grape variety that was the easiest to grow, that would grow the most grapes, the fastest, and without needing a lot of intervention or a lot of work.
Quella che ovviamente resisteva alle malattie un po' di più, quella che produceva di più, non essendoci necessità di qualità a quel tempo.
So the farmers at those days needed quantity. They didn't care about the quality. They wanted to grow grapes that were going to be resistant to pest and disease and that were going to produce a lot of grapes. Whether the quality was good or bad, they didn't care. They wanted the quantity.
E in quest'ottica la Barbera è ideale.
And for this, Barbera is perfect. It's a very vigorous plant.
è molto meno esigente, è un po' un mulo, è molto meno esigente di tanti altri vitigni.
You see, it's very easy to grow. It doesn't need a lot of help. It can survive through difficult weather conditions, and it produces an abundance of grapes unless you intervene.
Come diceva anche il professor Gerbi, solo negli ultimi anni si è capito come migliorarne la qualità.
Yeah, it's only in the recent
Prima di tutto riducendo molto le rese.
It's only in recent years that we've come to understand that to raise the quality of Barbera, we had to reduce the quantity. So we had to limit the yield in order to get a more concentrated, better quality grape that we could make better wine from.
Ma per ridurre le rese, per produrre una Barbera di qualità, ci doveva essere una domanda di vini di qualità, una domanda pronta a pagare questi vini.
Yes, the problem is to convince people to do this, we have to offer them buyers, people who are going to pay for what they're doing. So if they're going to reduce the quantity they make, imagine if you're the farmer, 30 years ago, you knew year in and year out you would make this much wine and you would sell all of it. So you wouldn't sell it for much, but you would sell it. So you could project into the future what you would earn year by year. So now the question is, we want these producers to limit their production, raise their quality, drop their quantity, and it makes it very difficult for them to project into the future what they'll earn year in and year out, because there's no guarantee that there is a market for a higher quality Barbera.
E questo è uno dei motivi, secondo me, a mio parere, per il quale la Barbera ancora non ha la notorietà che meriterebbe nel mondo, perché esiste ancora l'idea e il ricordo di una Barbera contadina non buona, povera, difficile da bere, per un palato che cerca un buon vino, e esiste già dall'altra parte le Barbere come quelle che abbiamo assaggiato stamattina.
Yeah, so in his opinion, the biggest problem confronting Barbera is it still has a really bad global reputation. It's still thought of as a farmer's wine, not very good quality, difficult to drink, not great with food. And so what people's perception of Barbera is versus the Barberas we drank this morning, we have to change the narrative, because the global perception of Barbera is it's a poor farmer's wine, and we need to change that narrative into a wine of quality that can age well.
Oltretutto, questa mattina c'era il vostro ospite, colui che vi ha ospitato nel vigneto, vi ha fatto capire come la maggior parte dei soci, adesso qui siamo da Vinchio Vaglio, ma se io prendessi un'altra cantina cooperativa, come ce ne sono tante in questa provincia di Asti, sarebbe la stessa cosa. I soci hanno spesso delle piccole dimensioni viticole.
Mm-hmm. So, aside from Vinchio Vaglio, which has done a very good job over the past 50 years, there are many other cooperatives in this region that are growing Barbera, and they're made up of members who have teeny tiny parcels of vineyards. So they're not exactly working together properly.
Quindi se tu hai un vino che non è sempre buono, che non riesci a vendere caro, hai pochi ettari, quindi ne fai anche poco, l'unica soluzione è la cooperativa.
Mm-hmm. So if you have only a few rows of vines, you can't guarantee the quality of your wine every year. Some years it's good, some years it's terrible. There's not a market demand. You can't ask a high price for it. You cannot remain independent. You have to join a cooperative or you'll never make enough money to sustain your family.
E purtroppo in Italia, a parte negli ultimi 20 anni, i prodotti della cooperativa sono sempre stati prodotti mediocri e quindi ancora la cooperazione purtroppo si porta quest'idea sbagliata oggi,
Yeah.
Perché l'abbiamo visto con la qualità dei vini questa mattina.
See, so what happened is that as these small farmers with a few rows of vines got together to form cooperatives, they all had a few rows of pretty bad wine, and so they all got together and formed a pretty bad cooperative. So what happened was the general perception of cooperatives in Italy was bad quality. So what's happened in recent years, not only here, but anche in Trentino, Alto Adige, altre poste, also up north, other places, cooperatives have started to, as Vinchio Vaglio does, that we saw this morning, help the growers to understand how to do better, how to make their wines better, how to get better quality. These cooperatives are raising the quality level, helping their growers to understand and to get on board with these procedures to make better wine. But they're still fighting this overall perception of cooperatives as bad quality.
Quello che effettivamente ci ha regalato questa povertà è non cambiare le vigne.
Yeah.
Di vigne vecchie ci ha regalato.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Allora, vado più a lungo così.
Vai.
Quello che il contadino è povero, era povero. La produzione era necessaria, quindi doveva produrre vino sia per mangiare e bere, sia eventualmente per scambiare per ottenere farina o quant'altro.
So these poor farmers they were growing enough grapes to make wine that they could use to augment their diet, to have vitamins, to have calories. Also they could use to trade, to buy grain or other things they didn't produce.
Ora, prima della filossera almeno non c'era da pagare la barbatella nuova che pianti, perché lo facevi per talea la propagazione, facevano la propagazione per talea. Oggi dopo la filossera le barbatelle o si comprano o si facevano, ma si impiantavano, si innestavano in campo.
See, so before phylloxera, the farmers were fine because they didn't need to buy rootstock. They could replant, the vines. They could put the cordons under the ground. They could regrow their vines. After phylloxera, they had to buy the tiny rootstock plants. So suddenly everything changed. After phylloxera, they weren't able to repropagate their vineyards. They had to pay money to do that.
Comprare o comunque innestare in campo. Innestare non so come si dice.
Ho detto, sì.
E quindi questo significa che il contadino, per non perdere soldi, per non perdere produzione, manteneva le vigne il più a lungo possibile.
See, so the good side of this is that the people, these poor farmers, they didn't have enough money. To them to go 8 years without being able to have wine that was decent enough to either trade or to drink themselves. So keeping the old vines made more sense.
Se in più aggiungiamo il fatto che c'era una cultura contadina così forte che erano abituati a potare, sapevano potare una pianta di vigna.
Yeah, this is the other side of it. So because these old farmers were very poor, they have a tradition and a history of pruning. They know how to prune their old vines, how to care for their old vines because they had to. They couldn't risk any of them dying because they didn't have money to replant them. So the culture of learning how to properly prune an old vine is also a heritage element that came from this poor culture of poor farming.
Una pianta potata bene dura più a lungo.
Yes, a plant that's pruned properly will last longer.
Oggi abbiamo una maggior meccanizzazione, abbiamo delle cooperative di gente, per l'unico modo che abbiamo, attenzione, non critico la cosa, ma abbiamo delle cooperative di potatori anche che arrivano da paesi dove non c'è una cultura magari della vigna, a cui è stata insegnata a potare. È chiaro che le vigne non possono più durare quel tempo lì.
Esatto. So he's talking about now that we have mechanization and we also have mechanical pruning, we have other things. So this sort of covering that's gone over the top of this tradition of poor farmers who pruned themselves. Now, what looks like a good thing, mechanical pruning, different things have come into places where they don't fit with the culture of the old pruning.
Perciò io dico, abbiamo la fortuna di avere ancora delle vecchie vigne. Mi ricordo quando io arrivai per la prima volta in queste zone, che molti viticoltori avevano ancora le vigne piantate subito dopo la fillossera, tant'è che non si parlava né di cover né di SO4 né di...
Sì, esatto.
Non si parlava di portinnesti così particolari,
Esatto, sì.
si parlava di rupestris du lot e di riparia.
See, so he's discovered in his studies and in his travels a lot of these old farming areas, particularly around here. There are vineyards that were planted immediately after phylloxera by poor farmers who didn't know anything about rootstocks or anything about grafting or anything about what needed to be done. They did what they could with what they had. And so what we have now are vines in this area that were replanted directly after phylloxera was winding down, and they're still in existence now because of good pruning and good care.
Io credo che questo territorio è una grande fortuna. Le cooperative oggi sono una grande fortuna, le cooperative che lavorano bene. La grande fortuna è di avere, secondo me, un vitigno che di suo ha le caratteristiche per piacere ad un palato non così perfezionato per vini speciali.
So he says that in this area we're really lucky, and the cooperatives are really lucky because the vines that they're growing, Barbera, produces wines that aren't specific to any one style of wine. So, you know, when you look at the difference between a Nebbiolo and a Barbera, Barbera is a more flexible wine that can produce different styles of wines, which gives them a lot more options, a lot more flexibility. So this is a really fortunate sort of result of what's happened in the past few decades.
Pensavo proprio al Nebbiolo.
Sì, esatto.
Il Nebbiolo è un vitigno che quando lo assaggi la prima volta non piace. È più semplice che una Barbera ti piaccia la prima volta, perché è fruttata, perché non ha tannini, perché ti riempie la bocca.
It's much more, Barbera is much more accessible to someone who's new to wine and new to red wines and new to Italian wines. If you hand a glass of Nebbiolo to somebody who is new to Italian red wines, it's not accessible. It's very difficult, it's too acidic, it's too tannic. It's very hard to unpack, but a glass of Barbera is fruity, less tannin, it's much easier to drink and much more approachable.
Io mi ricordo benissimo quando andavo in Svizzera, io sono nato e cresciuto in Svizzera francese, dove il vino è Borgogna, è Francia prima di essere Italia, e quando qualche mio amico importatore mi chiedeva di commentare i vini e di far assaggiare i vini che presentavano, la Barbera piaceva a tutti, il dolcetto non piaceva a nessuno. Ecco, tant'è che è stato abbandonato.
So when he was first starting off his career in France and Switzerland, and someone asked him to comment and to present wines, everyone loved the Barbera. Everyone hated the Dolcetto. So it's a wine that's easy to present to people. It's a wine that brings people in rather than pushes them out.
E quelli che bevevano Barolo, che assaggiavano Barolo o Barbaresco, lo facevano o perché già erano degli esperti di vino o per snobismo.
See. So yes, so people who are trying Nebbiolo or Barbaresco for the first time, they only like it if they're a wine expert, or everybody else thinks it's awful. So.
Perché era il vino più caro.
Sì, yes, esatto. Sì.
Quindi io credo veramente che questo è un territorio che, se riuscirà a far passare il messaggio, grazie anche alla qualità dei vini di oggi, veramente lo dico, che la Barbera è un grande vitigno che ti dà la possibilità di bere un vino da 7-8 euro molto buono quotidiano, ma ti dà anche la possibilità di bere un vino più complesso, più pieno, più importante, spendendo qualcosa in più. Credo che il Piemonte e questo territorio in particolare avrà una grande fortuna.
So the beauty of this whole concept is that now, because the quality of Barbera has come up in thanks to people like Vinchio Vaglio and things that have happened in the past few years, you can drink, one can drink a very nice bottle of Barbera for 7 or 8 euros. And if you get attracted by it and seduced by it and interested by it, then you want to spend a little bit more and try a Barbera that's aged or has been in wood or is a little bit more complex. So it gives a range of potential with just one grape that can bring people who are new to wine all the way up to fine wine status. So it's a grape that we're very fortunate to have in Piedmont.
E una delle fortune di questa zona è di avere la Barbera e di avere ancora numerosissime vigne vecchie.
And there are a lot of very old vines of Barbera in this area because of this history of poor farming.
Ci sono ancora da qualche parte, adesso magari la cooperativa, la Vinchio Vaglio non le ha, come si diceva stamattina, schedate, ma ci sono ancora delle vigne dell'inizio Novecento.
Yeah.
Ne esistono ancora poche, ma
He's sure that there are Barbera vines in this region from the very, very early 1900s. Even though projects like Vinchio Vaglio haven't been able to sort of make a perfect spreadsheet and a perfect map of exact documents documenting each parcel and the exact age, they're working on it now, but Gianni is sure that there are vines that are over 100 years old, just post-phylloxera in this region of Barbera.
grazie.
Abbiamo etichettato vino da tavola perché abbiamo dato le commissioni, se lo bozza li facciamo figurarsi.
Sì.
Question earlier about what these guys care about. Do people care as much?
Like consumers or?
No,
Oh.
producers.
Ah, okay.
Is there a real input in finding more old vines and producing wines for consumers?
Only Barbera or other grapes?
Barbera,
Okay.
Barbera, okay.
So la domanda è, Gianni, che qui in Vinchio Vaglio sapevamo che c'è questi produttori che vogliono essere parte della cooperativa perché hanno interesse di queste vecchie vigne. Lui chiede se c'è altri produttori di Barbera in zona qui o forse in Puglia che hanno interesse in questo concetto di vecchie vigne e l'importanza che c'è.
Sì, assolutamente sì. Mi viene in mente un produttore, ma subito così, il primo, ma sicuramente intanto la dicitura vecchie viti, vigne vecchie è cresciuta su molte etichette.
Okay.
Quindi c'è un interesse sicuro.
See, so now as we begin to see more labels that start to have these words on it, old vines, vecchie vigne, vite vecchie, this concept is getting into the sort of marketing head of producers who want that on their labels too. So he didn't say this, but I will say this. The problem is defining what is old vine. So that's why we're all here. But yes, producers, Gianni is saying that producers across Italy they are understanding that these words are meaningful on their labels in terms of marketing and also in terms of preserving their heritage.
Sorry to hit the floor, but what does Gianni think is an old wine then?
Ok,
Sorry.
per te, tuo parere, ma vecchie vigne quanti anni hanno bisogno di avere?
Ma basta.
Terrible question.
Dipende cosa vogliamo. Se vogliamo fare marketing, se vogliamo fare.
No, tuo parere.
Okay,
Sì.
Per me sopra 50 anni.
More than 50.
I agree.
Dopodiché è chiaro che se ci sono delle vigne, e ci sono, pensavo a un produttore, Luca Ferraris, che sta facendo tutto un bel discorso intorno alla vecchia vigna, è anche più vecchia, quindi vigne di 80 anni ci sono ancora.
Sì.
Vigne di 70 anni ce ne sono parecchie.
Sì. And he
So,
says,
anche il professore
sì.
sicuramente le ha anche lui più di me, sa quali sono, ma
faccio un esempio
del dopoguerra,
che può
del
essere
dopoguerra,
interessante.
sì.
Sotto il castello di Grinzane, nella
Sì, sì.
linea Gustava, c'è una porzioncina di Barbera piantata nel 1947
Wow, ok.
che stiamo
Dopo la guerra.
cercando con Anna Schneider di salvare tra
Sì.
l'insensibilità, devo dire,
di tutti.
Sì, sì, sì. So yes, they're all agreeing that yes, it's something that they're interested in. And if
monumento tiene,
his example was just below Castello Grinzane, where Benzo Cavour was. There's a vineyard of Barbera that was planted in 1947, right after the war. So yes, there is an interest historically. Heritage-wise, patrimony-wise, also, in terms of commerce, but also in terms of quality.
Soprattutto in questo momento in cui la Barbera sta patendo veramente molto per via della flavescenza dorata, conservare un patrimonio genetico molto diversificato ti permette di avere più possibilità di salvare delle piante.
Sì.
Se abbiamo moltiplicato dei cloni e li stiamo piantando e sono dei cloni poco resistenti, è chiaro che rischiamo di perdere parecchia Barbera.
Sì.
Se invece abbiamo un patrimonio che è una selezione massale di individui molto diversi tutti,
Sì.
abbiamo più possibilità di conservare bene tutto.
Sì.
Oltretutto, se pensiamo che queste vigne vecchie sono anche, come dire, più facilmente resistenti agli eccessi climatici, gli eccessi di caldo, gli eccessi di freddo, la mancanza d'acqua, l'eccesso d'acqua. Quindi
Esatto.
praticamente abbiamo la possibilità con queste vecchie vigne veramente, oltre a un discorso di produzione di vini più concentrati,
Esatto.
ma anche di produrre più regolarmente.
So he's talking about massal selection now, as we were speaking about earlier in the vineyard. The importance of the old vines is that they have resistance to lots of things, to drought, to excess water, excess heat, excess cold, this climate of excess, whether it's excess lack or excess too much of. The massal selection now from the old vines is the future.
C'è anche un aspetto di interesse scientifico molto importante, perché se queste piante che sono esposte come le altre alla visita del famoso Scaphoideus titanus, vettore della flavescenza dorata, fino adesso non si sono ammalate, perché? La domanda è: hanno delle resistenze oppure Scaphoideus titanus non ci va per qualche ragione?
Yes.
Io sono affascinato da questa
Sì,
ipotesi.
sì, 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 è come filosofia, sì, nelle suoni vulcanici.
Magari
Yeah.
puzzano, hanno degli odori particolari, sono
So,
repellenti.
so this is the other side of the coin is,
Sicuramente sono meno ombreggiate,
Yeah, exactly.
quello è di sicuro che l'ombra c'è meno.
some of the problems that are confronting vines now, the question isn't always how can we find the right massal selection that will resist them, but also maybe why do we not have them in certain areas? Is there something in the area that this pest or disease can't survive with, as in phylloxera couldn't survive in volcanic soils? Is there something in this region that kept certain pests or certain diseases away? So it can't be all about the grape, it has to be also about the environment.
Other mitigating factors.
Exactly. Sì, 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 sì.
Good. Thank you very much for outlining the social history, which I think is so important here. The other thing which we might add, which we will know all about, is the flight to the city and the industrialization, and therefore the market for inexpensive basic wines went right down, didn't it? Because people moved to the Fiat factory, they no longer looked after their vines, so those vines were no longer cared for properly, and the whole thing, and wine eventually became a luxury product, not an everyday food, as you were talking about.
Se ho capito bene,
Sì, lui...
tutto deve diventare prodotto.
Sì, dopo la seconda guerra mondiale, tutti sono andati alle città per industria. Quando loro hanno sparita, tutte le vigne sono andate caduta perché non c'è nessuno per curare. E adesso il mercato per vino sfuso, tipo vino meno caro, è caduta anche perché non hanno bisogno ancora per alimentare. E adesso cosa dice di questa? Sei d'accordo che questa ha fatto un parte del problema che ha adesso?
Sì, è sicuramente una parte del problema è anche quello. È chiaro che se la vogliamo leggere in questo modo, il problema per la Barbera ci potrebbe essere, perché la Barbera in assoluto non ha la complessità di un nebbiolo, in assoluto non ha il fascino di un pino nero, di un grande pino nero, in assoluto non ha la longevità di un grande taglio bordolese.
Sì. So he agrees that when after the Second World War, when people fled to the cities, the people who were left went to the cities, and the low quality vineyards collapsed because no one needed it anymore for food. And wine became more of a luxury, not even a luxury, but maybe once a week instead of once a day. Now, Barbera is playing a big part in making wine more of a once a day sort of thing because it's so accessible. It's not expensive, it's not hugely tannic, it's not extremely difficult to unpack and to enjoy. It's a wine that brings people together rather than pulls them apart. So his point is that Barbera is a great grape to rebuild the culture of wine that's more a part of daily life than it has been since after the war. And of course, we're not talking at all about health scares and things at the moment, but that's all part of it as well. So.
Sarebbe un errore pensare che tutte le Barbere devono diventare l'Insintesis, il Sei Vigni in Sintesi,
sì.
il Brico dell'Uccellone, per citarne una molto conosciuta, o la Bogliona.
He says
Non
we'd
può
be
essere
making
che diventi così.
we'd make a huge mistake if we took the track of trying to turn all the Barbera into these very refined, like say syntheses, to all of these that are spending time in wood and maturing for 3 years. That would be a huge error, because the beauty of Barbera is it can draw people in a simple, fruity wine to begin with, and then once they're interested, they'll look at these more complex wines.
Certo, se il futuro è solo per i grandi vini, la Barbera allora potrebbe soffrire. Se il futuro è solo di certi grandissimi vini da collezione, da speculazione, allora forse la Barbera in quel caso può soffrire. Ma io credo che ci sia ancora spazio. Le persone vorranno bere un vino più semplice, non è sempre il momento di complicare, di pensare a quello che bevi. A volte c'è il momento della spensieratezza, di una bevuta mangiando molto semplicemente.
Yeah, there will always be a place in the world for simple Barberas. Yes, we need to create more complex ones that can age, just because that's going to exalt the profile of the grape. But we must leave space for this introductory, approachable Barbera.
Non so se in futuro, scusa.
No, volevo aggiungere, nel 2020, per un lavoro con il consorzio, avevamo analizzato e fatto assaggiare 110 Barbere prese in commercio. Sì.
Wow, in 2020 they tried 110 Barberas.
E rielaborando i dati sono venuti fuori 3 livelli, tutti di ottima qualità, ma con un rapporto qualità-prezzo che fa 3 fasce, una fascia base, una fascia intermedia già molto buona ed una top di gamma.
What they discovered was these 110 Barberas were all very good quality, but they fell into 3 distinct categories. An easy drinking, cost-effective one, a middle range, really good quality versus price point, and then a top one which was more of a luxury. All were good quality, but 3 levels of complexity and
Aggiungo un
price.
pensiero del tutto personale, è quello che mi piacerebbe che sparisse dall'offerta di mercato, è una Barbera in offerta speciale nel centro del corridoio del supermercato a 1,50 €, perché questa, considerato che occorrono 700 ore anno di lavoro per coltivare le vigne, non si può fare.
Exactly. So he says the one thing that he wants to see disappear
Lui lo sa.
is, you're walking down the grocery store, and in the center of the aisle there's a barrel with, on offer, Barbera, €1.50. And he said, because think of the time that has to be spent in the vineyard and also the cost of the bottle, the label, everything else. He said there should never be a €1.50 Barbero anywhere. That's the one he wants to see the end of.
Forse in futuro... Oh, sorry.
Why is it, do you think, that Nebbiolo has been able to establish itself as a fine wine ahead of Barbera?
Lei ha chiesto perché Nebbiolo è diventata un vino di luxe, ma e Barbera non era.
Allora, perché ci devo mettere anche un po' di mio, nel senso,
Sì.
allora, il nebbiolo è stato considerato da tutti i giornalisti nel mondo in poco tempo, è diventato uno dei vini favoriti. Ci sarà
Sì.
una motivazione e io penso sia nel genio del nebbiolo. Il nebbiolo ha pochi uguali come vitigni.
Sì.
È un vitigno geniale perché ha dei tannini eppure sono eleganti, ha dei profumi che sembrano poco interessanti, invece più invecchia e più diventa interessante.
Sì.
Io credo che esistono dei vitigni di serie A e la Barbera lo è, ed esistono dei vitigni hors categorie.
Sì.
E il Nebbiolo insieme al Pinot Nero lo sono.
See, he says basically it became the darling of journalists around the world at a moment when they were looking for a wine similar to a Pinot Noir that was, it was complex, it had tannins, it could age properly. It started off as neutral. As it aged, it became more complex on the nose and on the palate. And the groundswell of interest behind it drove it forward. Barbera doesn't have those characteristics, so it didn't happen that way.
I'm not sure that Barbera at that stage thought too much of it.
No, but this is the concept. No, but it's the concept of why journalists got behind it. They saw potential.
Cynthia, is it also because in its genesis, Barolo was really promoted and originated by aristocrats at the time?
Questa è una bella domanda. Sì, è una bella domanda. Lei chiede, ma perché Nebbiolo, Barolo era i vini di aristocratici e per questo hanno fatto regali tra i corti reali, tutto questo. Sì.
Ma dunque, allora occorre dire due cose. Uno dei motivi per cui Nebbiolo ha fatto la fortuna dei territori che lo coltivano è anche dovuto al fatto che non si adatta a qualunque situazione. Quindi se tu prendi Nebbiolo e lo porti da un'altra parte, viene vino, ci mancherebbe, ma non di grande classe. Il Nebbiolo deve vedere le Alpi.
So because it's such a homebody, Nebbiolo has to see the Alps. If you move it somewhere else, it will make wine, but it'll be bad. So I'm not sure everyone in Oregon would agree with that. But Nebbiolo also had a mystique. It could only grow in one place and make excellent wines only in one place. So it had a mystique.
Così dà eccellenze, va bene, nelle Langhe, ma non dimentichiamo Carema, non dimentichiamo Ghemme, Gattinara, non dimentichiamo questi posti dove ci sono condizioni pedoclimatiche che esprimono bene il Nebbiolo. Poi ha avuto anche un po' di fortuna dal punto di vista, come posso dire, della storia.
Sì.
Perché all'inizio dell'Ottocento ci sono stati 3 personaggi che hanno contribuito a scrivere il futuro del Nebbiolo, che sono stato la marchesa Falletti di Barolo, mai sufficientemente
Esatto,
ricordata,
sì.
ma dall'altra parte a Pollenzo il generale Staglieno che scriveva
Sì.
del modo di fare il vino nel 1847
Sì.
e poi non dimentichiamo Cavour.
Esatto. So he's saying Nebbiolo also benefited from the fact that
Noi eravamo analfabeti.
it
quelle-
expresses itself quite differently in these places that are near each other, Ghemme, Valtellina, Gattinara, Langhe. But in the 1800s, we also had some very influential people who were writing about it and doing interesting experiments with it, and that also created a mystique around it. So Marchesi di Barolo, the Faletti family, the famous enologist who was working with Cavour, and Cavour himself. So that also added to this groundswell of interest.
E Cavour, che è arrivato a Grinzane a 22
Sì.
anni, che però conosceva i vini del mondo, pensava di mettere Pinot Nero
Sì.
e ne piantò di Pinot Nero, ma poi verificò che il Nebbiolo forse era meglio.
Era meglio, sì. Yes. Cavour wanted to plant Pinot Noir in Grinzane, but it didn't do well.
Perché amava i vini di Borgogna.
Esatto, sì, because he grew up with French wines, and so it wasn't until he realized that Nebbiolo did better there, it is its home place, that he really took on board working with it. So,
And Camille Cavour was the father of Italian unification.
Yes.
one of, yes, exactly. And he had money.
From the oenological point of view, is not the first
Yeah.
merit. of
No,
Cavour.
no.
Allora io capisco che Sara tenta di sviare
Sì.
l'attenzione rispetto al fatto che lei adesso deve guidare la degustazione.
Sì.
Ma dobbiamo passare oltre.
Tocca a lei.
I'm ready.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.